sort of, it's just going to be a computer sitting in a room, whatever you like, or a person or an oracle, whatever you like. It's just going to be a system that's going to be such that we're going to feed into it the laws of physics and, information about, I don't know, what's happening on a particular mountaintop on a particular day and about monkeys and bananas and all everything. We're just going to feed it all of the information that we have. And the goal is that we're going to be able to ask it any yes, no question of fact, and it can deliver an answer. Make it easy for yourself. Imagine that the universe is deterministic and that the laws are effectively computable. So you're just, there's not going to be any problem about computation or about there's always going to be questions that it can't truthfully answer. How do we know that? Just ask it. I mean, I can tell you this without knowing what its database looks like, what the memory looks like, just ask it, is the question that's about to appear in the output channel. So the idea is you feed it a question through an input channel, delivers an answer through the output channel. Is the answer that's about to appear in the output channel? No.
Right.
It can't truthfully answer. What the fuck, right? I mean, this is a mundane question of physical fact. And again, we can make models of this if you don't want to think about the actual universe. Oh, maybe the laws are deterministic. Maybe, imagine a universe that you can completely control. Imagine a deterministic universe. So here's a little example. Imagine a deterministic universe with effectively computable laws. Imagine a Turing machine in the universe. So, and program it with the laws. Right? So now not only that the system, the internal system, knows the laws, but that it's able to compute the laws because it's a Turing machine. The laws are effectively computable. You can come up with a whole cluster of questions it can't answer. Right? First, what is the answer? Whether the question about the answer that's about to appear in the output channel is no, can't answer that. Can't even correctly guess the correct answer to that.
It can't answer it truthfully.
Can't answer truthfully. How about this one? It can't answer at all. Can't answer truthfully, but won't answer at all. Feed it its own, you might think it's a Turing machine, it should be, and the laws are computable, it should be able to predict what any system in the world will do if it started on a given state, right? Feed it its own Turing number and say, do you halt?
Right.
When fed someone. Can't answer. So what you see is that there's a class of questions that, because of the structure, the logical structure of a system representing the world from the inside, it can't truthfully answer. So I've been thinking about that. Partly, it's not that I started thinking about that. It's that I was thinking a lot about determinism. I was thinking a lot about, counterpredictive devices. And I was thinking just a lot about these sort of little puzzles. And I realized that actually that's the clearest formal expression of what's going on in all of those puzzles. And it's a little thread that when you start to pull at it, you see has deep roots everywhere. So for example, there are lessons about determinism in that little puzzle. When you say, how do I understand physically? I have a little physical model, a mechanical model, of a system inside a deterministic universe. What's going on there? So that's one, but also sort of a lot of stuff you can start to understand by just focusing in detail on what's going on with that model and how it can correct some of the kind of big picture ideas with which we approach physics and questions about ourselves. One of them is free will, but one of them is time. How do we understand time from the inside? Another one is, what's going on with determinism? Like, why couldn't you have a Laplacian demon in the universe? Shouldn't a Laplacian demon be able to answer every yes/no question of fact? What's going on there? So that's why I've been thinking about those questions. No temptation on my part to think that they show that reality is inconsistent. I think there are real lessons to learn from them.
Do you find that most physicists who aren't trained philosophically believe in free will or tend to not believe in free will? And then those who are trained philosophically, is there also a correlation there?
So I don't know about numbers. For sure, many of the loudest voices in physics, or the kind of thing that you get, at the end of the day at the bar when people have had a couple of things to drink and they're kind the kind of the loose talk is, they're very happy to dismiss free will. But I think what's going on there, so there are two things and philosophers, it's a mix. There certainly are prominent philosophers who are happy to reject free will. But I'll say a little bit about what's the landscape looks like. So philosophers are a mixed bag. They really are interested in the concept of free will. I mean, they're thinking, they have an idea of agency and it's embedded in questions about morality, and they're trying to understand, how do we reconcile these ideas that I think a lot of them, like moral psychologists, they take as a datum that we are free, and they're trying to understand, how do I account for determinism? So many of them are developing notions of freedom that capture the aspects of freedom that they're interested in, like moral responsibility and so on. So there's a lot of compatibilists, but they're mostly working on the side of understanding the concept of free will in a way that accommodates the physics. They're not deeply embedded in the physics. They don't really understand in detail. Or they do. I mean, you get a one-sentence view of what physics says. Imagine they're assuming a classical world, and they say what physics tells us is that the initial state of the world fixes everything that happens thereafter. So they're trying to understand, if we take that for granted, how do we understand free will? There's some people who don't. Some people who say, no, the physics is wrong, libertarians, and because I know as a datum better than I know anything about physics that I'm free.
And those are called libertarians, or libertarian free will.
That's right. And then there are other people who bite the bullet. They say physics tells us we're not free, so we're not free. It's an illusion, this kind of vocabulary of illusion. A lot of the physicists think that by freedom we mean precisely the ability to break the laws of physics, and that's an illusion, so they reject it. So they don't have a very sophisticated conceptual analysis of freedom. They take the idea that to be free is to break the laws of physics in the universe, and they just say that's an illusion. We've been wrong about lots of things. So I think the more interesting middle space is the one that doesn't start out with a fixed idea of freedom, and that also takes the physics seriously enough to say, no, I'm not going to take one line of physics. I'm going to take physics in detail and a model of a human being in detail, and try to understand, sort of how life and cognition emerges, and what's going on when what's going on with the onboard machinery, and how is it affected by the stuff outside. And I'm also not just going to take, a Newtonian universe of the image of the universe. I'm going to take, sort of a relativistic image of the universe. I'm going to take relativity series. I think you get nudges both in our understanding of the physics and in our understanding of ourselves in a way that brings them into alignment. And it has to be that way for the reason I said. Nature has found a solution to this problem, and there need to be corrections on both sides of, the naive understanding of what physics tells us, and the naive understanding of what we're doing or what our place is in the causal order when we're making a decision.
Okay, so this is a great time to get into your account of free will. And then also, so you're going to define it. And then also, it would be great if you then state why this account of free will comports with an intuitive account of free will. Otherwise, there's no sense in even calling it free will. You could use some other name for it. It needs to have some concordance with the folk intuition that we use to develop the word free will. And then also, well, why do we have it then? Do we actually have this form of free will? So please.
Yeah. So again, so this can be unsatisfying in some ways. And I'm also going to say things that I didn't say in the book because I think my views are changed a little bit.
Please.
It's not like I'm offering an analysis of what free will is. I'm happy to tell you what I think is going on with us and the ways in which it answers to some aspects of what we think of as free will. So it captures some elements of. So first I'll say the one thing about the physics. So I think one of the things that's important, and that's come from thinking about these sorts of puzzles, like the self-referential one that I told you about. That is the idea that there are questions of fact that we can't answer, even, quite aside from physics and quite aside, like how do you understand that? What you realize is that actually, when you take relativity very seriously and you ask yourself, okay, I'm in a relativistic setting, I should say too, this comes partly too from thinking about counterpredictive interactions. So give you all of the information you want about the world. Like, your task is to predict what I will do. You've got a perfect physical model of me. You've got, or even like a tabletop device. You've got a perfect physical model of it. You know what the laws are. You know the initial conditions of the universe. It has a green light and a red light on top. Or if you're doing it to me, I'm a deterministic system. Predict, will I raise my hand or will I not? Or predict what this device will turn off or turn on. You might think you can do it. Okay. Let's suppose that I'm demanding that you feed the device your prediction, and it's programmed to do the opposite of what's predicted. Okay. Device like that's perfectly possible. I mean, we can write down a model of such a device in a deterministic setting, right? It's just a tabletop device that takes a prediction. So now you can see the connection with a self-referential paradox. Perfectly deterministic device that takes a prediction and does the opposite, right?
Just a moment.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a predictive device, but you called it a counterpredictive device. Is the counter just because you told it to do the opposite at one point?
Okay, so there's a predictor and a counterpredictive device. So the predictor is trying to predict the what this device is going to do. It has a perfect physical model, right? The system is a deterministic device. It's given as much information as you like. Give it the initial conditions of the universe, give it the laws that program the device, but the constraint is it has to feed its prediction, it has to tell its prediction to the device.
Okay.
What's going to happen, right? Now you might think, well, it has to be right. If it's got the initial conditions of the universe and it can compute, it ought to be able to predict this device. But hang on. It's going to give this device its prediction. And as long as this device works well, it's going to not be right. So what's going on? Thinking about that puzzle, right, makes you think, well, hang on, is there a mechanism in our classical theories for giving a system enough information to predict what's going to happen in the rest of the world? I mean, naively, the way everybody presents determinism is, yes, of course. I mean, what did Laplace say? Laplace said that if a system knew the positions and momenta of every particle, it would, and this is his phrase, it would embrace in a single formula, everything that would ever happen in that universe. And you think, we can have information about the past. In principle, we ought to be able to establish the positions and momenta of every particle. And if I had that information, I ought to be able to predict what anything would do. This little tabletop device, a Turing machine, another human being, right? We think that's the way that the implications of determinism are usually presented. But when you start thinking through in detail, in physical terms, whether even in principle, there's a mechanism for having enough information to predict the evolution of the universe, you find that it's not true. And actually, I'm going to make a methodological point here. Again, this is why this method of thinking about philosophical problems is so fruitful. You treat it as a physics problem. You're not starting out with ideas about free will and is a human being a physical thing. You start out by saying, I've got a physical model of a system in front of me. I've stipulated that this is a deterministic setting. I can set up a physics problem. Now I've got a predictor and I've got a counterpredictive device and I've got a physical model, a mechanical model. Is this a puzzle for like classical determinism? But as soon as you start to investigate it in that kind of detail, you realize, oh, hang on. There's no mechanism in the universe for generating predictions of that kind with certainty. And here's the reason. So again, this is why there's physics lessons. Well, look, in a Newtonian universe, it's kind of a little obscure, but you sort of realize, well, if you've got a system in the universe and it can check they're like kind of, in naturalistic terms, how do we check the positions and momentum of this particle and that one, but it never gets to a setting where it knows it's examined all of the particles that there are. So it doesn't just have to establish the positions and momenta of individual particles, specifically in classical and Newtonian physics. Specifically in Newtonian physics, you need to know the total state of the world, and there's actually no mechanism for determining that. That was always one of the problems with Newtonian physics, because gravitational influence travels instantaneously. Everything affects the force on this particle in the here and now. You need to know everything. So you might think, but that was always a bad thing about Newtonian physics, rectified in relativity. Now in relativity, we have an interaction by interaction understanding of what's going on the ground. And it's explicit in relativity. This was one of the big, wonderful things about relativity. One of the innovations that made it a great advance is to predict anything, you don't need to know the total state of the world. You just need to know its backlight cone, or indeed any cross-section of its backlight cone. Great. Okay, so let's look at, again in physical terms, at this puzzle. You've got a system predicting another system, deterministic, perfectly deterministic. Let's give the first system all of the physically accessible information, knows entire contents of its past light cone. Trying to predict this next system, does it have enough information to do that with certainty? No, it doesn't. Why? Because of the way that the light cones are nested inside one another.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying today's episode. If you're hungry for deeper dives into physics, AI, consciousness, philosophy, along with my personal reflections, you'll find it all on my Substack. Subscribers get first access to new episodes, new posts as well, behind-the-scenes insights, and the chance to be a part of a thriving community of like-minded pilgrimers. By joining, you'll directly be supporting my work and helping keep these conversations at the cutting edge. So click the link on screen here, hit subscribe, and let's keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge together. Thank you and enjoy the show. Just so you know, if you're listening, it's CURTJAIMUNGAL.org, kurtjaimungal.org.